Hello everybody, good to see you again. Welcome back to my channel. This is Physics of Creation. I am Locse and I am back here with Stewart Swerdlow. Welcome Stewart again. How are you?
Thank you, Istvan. I'm fine. Hope you're okay too.
I'm too okay. There we have a little problem here in our connection because it seems to be very bad weather in Stewart location, and I am getting very low downloading from his part, and I do not have a very good image, and I will replace this image with what you will see here, just a photograph with Stewart, because the image is absolutely no worthwhile. All right, so let's continue with our last session with the history of mankind. And as you remember, we started with a very interesting beginning of the history, and we get so far at the point of the Lyrians, when they spread over the galaxies. And you also talked about, in the meantime, of the draconian invaders invading Lyra, also what happened on Earth with those scorpion-like beings. Remember? Now let's get back just a little bit, because I don't want to forget about that. If you could describe a little bit the Lyrians as appearance, could you?
Sure. There were basically two types. Well, first of all of them would be at least 2 meters tall, maybe a little bit more, both male and female. They were basically, the majority, very white skin, blonde hair, very blue eyes. But there was another group that were considered to be the spiritual group, or the, I can't say religious, but spiritual leaders. And they had more red hair and green eyes. And so they were considered to be what they say in the English, oracle, where they would speak for the higher energies of God, mind, etc. So whenever the Lyrians would have an issue, or they would want to know about information, they would go to the red-haired people and ask them the questions and get the answers. And for example, the ancient Greeks had the oracle of Delphi, where they would go to this place in Delphi, and the woman would speak to them from spiritual levels. And that's why in ancient times, red-haired people were considered very mysterious and even evil, because they were so strange that they would have all this information. And the other interesting thing is, even today, red-haired people have more sensitive nerves and feel more pain, and they're very delicate compared to other people.
Oh.
So they're more sensitive.
Oh. Good.
It's interesting when I was a child, if I went in the sun, my hair turned red, and now my beard turns red.
Good. All right. That's interesting, really. And as you mentioned, but just in a few words, that these people, because of the invasion, because of the war, spread. I mean, the survivors actually spread over the galaxy. And you said that these people actually became later different races, maybe? Could you expand a little bit on that?
Yes, yes. So, for example, many of them spread to different star systems, and for example, the ones that came to Pleiades.
Mm-hmm.
Pleiades star system is even younger than our own star system, so no life developed there. So they colonized there, and they became those group. Another group went to Aldebaran system and became those beings, the very technical and the scientific beings. Other groups went to Tau Ceti and to Eridanus, Epsilon Eridanus, many places. And they had to adapt to the environment of their new home world. So, for example, the beings who went to Tau Ceti, for example, more dense energy, so they became a bit shorter, a little more dense bone density. The beings who went to other systems became lighter. And this, of course, happened over many millions of years. It didn't happen right away. And they did have an ability to change their genetics to adapt to those environments. And so we see this even happening on Earth. So, for example, people who live in hot, sunny countries, they have darker skin and darker hair, and people who live in the north have a lighter hair because they adapt to the environment.
Exactly. Now, you share kind of map, let's say like that. I would like to. I found it on the internet. If I can
Yes.
show it to the people, so I would like to share it, inclusive with you, and just for a bit, if you are able to comment a little bit on that map. All right. Give me just a few seconds. Excuse me?
Mm-hmm. It's a complicated map with many arrows and many lines.
Mm-hmm. Just
Yes.
to give
So
me a little
sometimes
bit.
a little difficult. People need to study it for a bit of time.
Yeah. Here it is, and I share with you my screen.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. This
Alright.
you can say is the flow chart of the colonization.
All right. Good. Now, what can we understand here?
Well, you can see how some of these survivors went to different star systems, and this is actually a very limited map because there's over 100 different colonizations that could not fit in one picture, you know.
Yeah.
But let's say the most, not the most important, but the largest colonies that were sent out. So you can see Lyrae and the attack from Draco, the war, and then it spread to the different areas. And then what isn't really known is that even the survivors among themselves, they had civil war.
Yeah.
Because there was argument about what they should do, where they should go, who should be in control, you know, and so it created many problems. And so what I wanted to show with this flow chart is how the Earth has so many influences by the different groups after a bit of time, which explains why we have so many different cultures, so many different nationalities. Even though we have a common origin, we have many different diversities because of these different groups that came here.
But
and that's why.
We could say that in the galaxy, in that moment, besides the Lyrians, there existed other races too, or didn't they?
Oh yes. Oh yes, they were.
Can they be? Can they
For
be the
example,
Syrians, or no?
yes, Sirius A, for example, they were not part of Lyra. They were separate group, and
But
they
who else?
were influential in the Atlantean colony, ancient Egypt, and even the creation of the Hebrews, which they created in Sumer, and then they amplified more in Egypt. So yes, there's many influences. There is also, of course, the reptilians, which were not Lyrians. They have a big influence on the Earth, and they believe that the Earth belongs to them. But what's interesting, Istvan, is that there are apparently other groups from even another galaxy who feel the Earth belongs to them too. So we are quite, let's say, a very desirable real estate in the universe, or at least
Yeah,
in this part of the galaxy.
yeah. It seems to.
Yeah.
But what can you say about down here, Marduk? What is
Yes.
this? Because
Well, yes, also known as Nibiru. Depends on the civilization, but Marduk or Nibiru is actually an artificial world that was created in Andromeda Galaxy that was sent into this particular region of space to mine resources and to create labor force for the Nibiruans. The Nibiruans are a type of reptilian, but not completely reptilian. They're kind of reptilian-like, as I put in my book. And they actually are enemies of the Draco, so they don't get along very well. But Nibiru came here to create a slave race to mine what is now Africa. They were interested in gold and uranium and other materials that they were going to bring back to Andromeda Galaxy.
and
And so
could they be the well-known Anunnaki?
Oh yes, that was what they were called. Yes, absolutely. But they had Istvan. They had the Abenaki, a group or a created race that looked like little bears, like little, almost like the Ewok from Star Wars.
Yeah.
And you know, Star Wars created the alien races in the movies based on these information. You know, and so yes, these were let's say, the little armies that the Nibiruans used whenever they came to a planet.
All right. So you say that the Sumerian tablets actually is more accurate than that, because Sumerian tablets are talking about the coming of the Anunnaki, and actually our Visuras also are talking about the arriving of Anunnaki, and talking about Anu, Enki, Enlil, others with different names, right? But the Zechariah Sitchin translation actually is not saying that the Anunnaki were reptilian-like, that he's saying that they had beard and very human-like actually, and that they, the Anunnaki, created the human being from zero, mixing, for example, the Neanderthalensis with their genes, and they obtaining a new race, and the first race to be the black race to be created, and after that came
The black race. Yeah, black race was created as a slave race in Africa to mine the gold and uranium. And they were, the Anunnaki, they were very reptilian-like. And that's why human beings have reptilian brainstem. And that's why we have skin the way we do, and etc., etc. And the beings with the beards, they were hybrids. They were not the original or the Anunnaki, but they were hybrids created by the Anunnaki so that humans would not be afraid of them.
So you say that Enki and Enlil and Anu actually are hybrids, not the original Anunnaki?
These were an alien group which you can read about in the book of Enoch. And this group was very, very reptilian. But they would create holographic images around themselves so that the humans would not be afraid of them.
All right.
And I suggest that people read the book of Enoch, because the book of Enoch is very detailed and descriptive of the genetic manipulation that these beings did on the earth, and the actual monsters that were created because of that.
All right. So who would be, in this case, who would be the Nephilim?
All it's not a group, it's a description.
All right.
See, that's the thing. People take words like Nephilim, Elohim, Melchizedek, and they make them into something they are not. These are descriptions. They're not. Nephilim means the ones who descended from, means the giants, basically means giants.
All right.
And the Elohim, the ones who descended from above. And Melchizedek basically means the ones who served the king. It was a political group that was passed on from father to son. So unfortunately out there are these new age material that the U.S. government created to make people confused. And people who don't understand the words, who don't speak the ancient languages, they think that it's something else. So I would encourage people to study ancient languages to understand what these things mean.
All right, then. Well, so let's make the things clear then, right? So,
yeah.
Okay, let's continue with the part that, okay, now we know that, for example, Lyrians spread away, all right, spread over the galaxy. They developed themselves differently, and we got to Maldek and Mars, where also Lyrians or Lyrian descendant arrived. And then, as you remember, we told that an ice comet came in, driven by Dracos, and they destroyed Maldek, almost destroyed Mars, all right, and then they modified, let's say like that, the weather on Earth, and it became it became now habitable.
Well, the oceans separated to let land masses form above the water, because before that it was only water on the earth. And so then there was ability to colonize the earth after that.
Yeah.
And that's when they brought the moon in, which, as I mentioned, is a vehicle. It's not a natural object. And the Draco used the moon to colonize the earth. And the largest continent that was available, that we now call Lemuria. And they brought their technology, they brought their genetics, they brought everything in their culture to set up a civilization on the earth in Lemuria. And in effect, that was the original civilization on the earth. Unless you want to include the scorpion beings that were actually here first, that went to the inside of the earth and still are there. And the inside of the earth was always colonizable, because it was not covered with water. It had land mass. It did have oceans, still does. And so that is why when sometimes they dig into coal mines on the earth now, and they go into very deep layers, they find artifacts that should not exist. They find tools, they find even weapons, imprints of shoes that are tens of millions of years old, and they shouldn't exist, but they find them in the coal mines. And that's because this is from civilizations inside the earth, and also from the colonization in the very beginning of the earth. So it's a very complicated story, and there are many, many factions, and so I understand that it may be difficult for people to understand the entire history, because it's very complicated, actually.
Mm-hmm. Of course, and when...
And you know...
Yeah, please.
Even now, the situation on the earth is complicated. It's not a question of, Illuminati versus everybody else. There's many, many things going on the earth right now, besides the Illuminati. There's interdimensional beings, there are alien beings, there are factions within all of that. So it's quite a mess.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the moment when actually the Maldekians and Martians come to Earth. Because there must be a moment, let's say, that when the land masses became habitable, for example, and exactly Maldek and Mars, so Maldek destroyed Mars almost. Now, when do they come to Earth then? And actually, Dracos when come to Earth? It must be almost at the same moment.
It actually was not, because the Draco colonized Lemuria long time before any human beings came to this planet.
And where did they go? Maldekians and Martians.
Sorry?
Maldekians and Martians. How did they survive though? Or where?
They were underground in Mars. Mars is also hollow like the Earth. So the survivors went inside Mars, and that's why on the surface we see only the ruins of the civilization that existed. That's all that's left. But the Lemurians, or the Draco reptilians, were in Lemuria for hundreds of thousands of years before Atlantis was colonized. And Atlantis was actually colonized from the Pleiades, not from Mars. That came later. The Atlanteans, or the humans from Pleiadian star system, came 500,000 years ago to colonize what became Atlantis. And that's when the trouble really started. That's when all of the wars began, and the reptilians and the humans were fighting against each other. And it was quite a disaster on the Earth. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until after Lemuria was destroyed, maybe 250,000 years ago, and then Atlantis survived until 10,500 BC, and that's when things got even more complicated. Because that is when other groups decided that they would come now, and they would try to create different races on the Earth.
Okay, just a second. Let's see a little bit. Many people say that Lemuria is not the same with Mu. And where was located Lemuria, as you say?
It was in what is now the Pacific Ocean. If you look at the Pacific Rim, the tectonic plates that make up the Pacific Rim, everything within that territory was Lemuria. It was a very large continent.
Well,
Mu
you see,
is just Mu is just a different term given to Lemuria. And mu, the word mu is in Lemuria. It's in there.
Mhm.
So again, it depends on the culture, on the civilization. Asian people refer to it as mu.
All right.
Others refer to it as Lemuria.
Let's stop here for the moment, and we will do some research together, I suggest, and let's try to figure it out more in more details if we can, to make comparisons. All right. Now, we will continue in the next session, though, and I only want to thank you for everybody to listen and to. If you want comment, please, and see you next time. And thank you, Stewart, again to be here and to share your knowledge. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, bye bye. See you next time.